You don't lose control all at once. You lose it quietly, one small moment, one slight shift. And before you've even registered what happened, your mood has changed, your thoughts are spiraling, and something that shouldn't matter is now running your entire day. That is not weakness. That is a pattern you were never taught how to break. This video gives you 10 Stoic habits to break it permanently. Stay with me for habit 6, because that single habit stops emotional spirals completely, not by changing what happens to you, but by changing what you need to happen. Master that, and nothing outside you controls you again. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That is not just a quote. That is a skill, specific, trainable, built one habit at a time. Today you start building it. Habit number 1, question your first thought. Your first thought feels certain, immediate, convincing. It is the most readily available interpretation of what just happened, and most of the time it is incomplete. Epictetus wrote in the Enchiridion, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of things. The emotion does not come from the event. It comes from the interpretation." The mind attached to the event before you had any time to examine it. You walk into a space, 2 people shift, the energy changes, and the mind fires immediately. Something was said. Something changed the moment. I arrived, and your mood reorganizes itself around an interpretation that may have no relationship whatsoever to what actually occurred. George Washington commanded, through years of conditions specifically designed to produce the worst available interpretation, outnumbered, undersupplied, making decisions where information was never complete. His documented quality was not the absence of that first alarming read. It was the trained, deliberate practice of not acting from it before asking one question. Is this what is actually happening, or is this simply the fastest interpretation my mind produced from incomplete information? That question creates the space where control lives. The next time something triggers you, before you respond, ask it. Fact or interpretation? The answer changes everything that follows. Habit number 2, drop the need to control everything. You are not overwhelmed because life is chaotic. You are overwhelmed because you're spending energy in territory that was never yours to begin with. Their decisions, their opinions, the way things were supposed to resolve, and didn't. Epictetus identified this distinction as the absolute foundation of everything Stoic philosophy was designed to produce. Some things are in our control and others not. Things in our control: opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion. Things not in our control: body, reputation, and in one word, everything that is not our own action. The more energy you spend attempting to control what does not belong on your list, the fewer resources you have for what actually does. Eisenhower planned and commanded the largest military operation in recorded history. D-Day involved variables so numerous that complete control of the outcome was never a realistic category. Weather, human behavior under fire, enemy decisions. And his documented approach was not to expand the attempt at control. It was to identify with surgical precision the decisions that were actually his, and to spend everything on those. Control your response. Let everything else be what it is. Habit number 3, reframe the story. Your mind tells stories instantly. A mistake becomes evidence of permanent limitation. A setback becomes proof that the direction was wrong. A delay becomes confirmation of something you were already afraid was true. And the story, not the event, produces the emotional state that follows. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame, and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." He was not counseling forced positivity. He was identifying the relationship between the event and what the mind decides to do with it, and the fact that the second part of that equation belongs entirely to you. Napoleon Bonaparte documented his response to military reversal not as defeat, but as data. What failed, why it failed, what the failure revealed about what needed to change. Not, why is this happening to me? But what can I take from this? Same event, different question, different story, different emotional outcome. The next time the worst available interpretation arrives automatically, ask the better question. Habit number 4, expect difficulty before it arrives. You do not suffer only from the problems themselves. You suffer because they arrived before you were positioned to meet them. The surprise is not a minor factor. The surprise is the mechanism by which a manageable difficulty becomes a crisis. Seneca wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." The premeditation does not create anxiety. It removes the element that makes difficulty more damaging than it needs to be, the gap between what you expected and what arrived. Hannibal Barca's crossing of the Alps in 218 BC stands as one of the most precisely documented examples of preemptive difficulty. Planning in military history, he did not begin the campaign assuming favorable conditions. He began having already accounted for altitude, freezing cold, mountain resistance, and the psychological weight of terrain most armies considered completely impossible. He expected all of it, not as a concession to failure, but as the specific preparation that transformed each difficulty into an expected cost rather than a disabling surprise. Before the day delivers its difficulty, ask, who will test me today? What form will it take? You are not manufacturing anxiety. You are removing the advantage that surprise hands to everything that finds you unprepared. Habit number 5, control your inner voice. Your mind is talking constantly, not occasionally, not only in the high-stakes moments, constantly, a running commentary on everything that arrives, what it means, what it confirms, where things are heading. Something goes wrong and the voice begins. This always happens, every time. I can't deal with this. And the emotional state follows the voice, not the event. Epictetus wrote, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." The identity that determines the voice must be decided before the voice is needed. Not in the moment the pattern is already running at full speed. Admiral Horatio Nelson commanded, through conditions specifically engineered to produce the catastrophizing inner voice, incomplete information, irreversible commitments, outcomes that would not be known until long after decisions had been made. His documented quality, described consistently by subordinates, not as the absence of pressure, but as the composed authority of someone who had already decided what the voice would say, was precisely what made the decisions possible that the conditions demanded. Decide what your inner voice says before the moment begins. Not with forced optimism, but with the specific, quiet authority of someone who has already made that decision. What we've built so far. Before we reach Habit 6, let's acknowledge what you've already constructed. Habit 1. You learn to question the first thought. Because the emotion doesn't come from the event. It comes from the interpretation you attached before you examined it. Habit 2. You drop the need to control what was never yours. Your response is yours. Everything else, let it be. Habit 3. You learn to reframe the story. Same event, different question, different emotional outcome. Habit 4. You stopped waiting for difficulty to arrive and started expecting it because nothing disturbs you when nothing surprises you. Habit 5. You took control of the inner voice before the moment gave it something to work with. 5 habits. 5 layers of the same structure. Meeting what arrives from a position that was already decided before it got there. But here is where it goes deeper, because everything built so far is the foundation. Habit 6 is what makes it unbreakable. If this is already landing somewhere real for you, Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Drop the words "I am unshaken" in the comments, as a declaration, as a commitment, as the statement of someone who has decided their emotional state will no longer be determined by what arrived today. Now, habit 6. Habit number 6, detach from outcomes. This is it, the habit this entire video has been building toward. Here is the hard truth most people spend years circling without ever seeing directly. You are not stressed because of what is happening. You are stressed because of what you need to happen, not the event, the need attached to the event. And the moment your peace depends on a specific outcome, you have handed the authority over your internal state to something you cannot fully control. You have committed to a significant direction, a decision made, a path taken, something real submitted to conditions that will now determine the result. And so you wait, not calmly, but in that draining, unproductive form of someone whose emotional state is running entirely on the timeline of something they no longer have authority over, replaying what was submitted, reconstructing what could differ, spending internal resources on a situation that has already moved past the point where that spending can change anything. That is not processing. That is attachment operating as if continued attention has access to an outcome that has already left the room. Epictetus wrote from inside, the most complete version of having no authority over outcomes that human experience provides. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life, not passivity, the absence of the need for things to be different from what they are, which means the spiral has nothing left to spiral around. Erwin Rommel commanded in conditions where attachment to a specific outcome was not a luxury the situation permitted. Desert warfare, supply lines that broke without warning, intelligence that was perpetually incomplete, conditions that changed faster than any planning structure could accommodate. His documented quality was not certainty of outcome, it was complete focus on execution, on what the current moment required, without the hesitation that attachment always introduces into the space between decision and action. You do what is yours to do, completely, with full presence. Then you release what was never yours to determine. No attachment, no spiral, no surrender of control. Habit number 7, train discomfort on purpose. Most people flee from discomfort the moment it appears. They avoid it, delay it, replace it with something that produces the sensation of having dealt with it without the actual encounter ever taking place. And that pattern builds a nervous system that treats discomfort as a genuine threat, firing the reactive response automatically every single time the signal arrives. Comfort does not create calm. It creates fragility. Epictetus taught voluntary discomfort as the central practical discipline of Stoic training. Make a practice of saying to everything that appears brutal, "You are just an appearance and not at all what you appear to be." Then examine it carefully. The voluntary encounter with what is uncomfortable builds the specific internal evidence that the discomfort does not require the automatic response. Alexander the Great is documented throughout the histories of his campaigns as possessing a quality his commanders described consistently, not the absence of physical pressure under extreme conditions, but the trained capacity to remain composed inside them, because the discomfort had been chosen voluntarily before it became unavoidable, which meant when it arrived as unavoidable, it landed on a nervous system that already knew exactly what meeting it looked like. The next time the impulse to react immediately fires, pause. Let the discomfort sit with you for a moment. That is precisely where control is built, not in the dramatic moments, but in the ordinary ones where The cost of remaining inside the discomfort is low enough to actually practice with. Habit number 8, stop taking everything personally. Not everything is about you. Your mind makes it feel as though it is, and the cost of that, carried across every interaction, every shifted tone, every changed expression, is the weight of hauling other people's entire internal world as though it were a direct commentary on yours. You are not reacting to what people do. You are reacting to what you have decided their behavior means about you. Epictetus was direct. If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these." The person acting from their own stress, their own limitations, their own particular version of a difficult day is not delivering a verdict on you. They are expressing the conditions of their own internal state. Julius Caesar navigated 2 full decades of political environments, specifically designed to produce the personalizing response, populated by people whose entire strategy depended on the target reading every slight as a direct commentary on their fitness and worth. His documented quality, the one that allowed sustained effectiveness in conditions that completely destroyed others, was the specific capacity to read behavior as information rather than as verdict. Not every action deserves a reaction. The next time something lands as personal, ask honestly, is this actually about me, or am I making it about me? People act from their own situation, not yours. Why carry something that was never addressed to you? Habit number 9, reflect every night. Most people move through the day and never look back at it. They react, they move forward, they repeat, and because the pattern is never examined, it is never broken. Seneca practiced the evening review every single night without exception, and documented the precise questions he asked himself as each day closed. What bad habit have you put right today? What fault have you resisted? In what respect are you better? Not self-criticism, the practical forward-pointing examination of where the gap between the standard and the execution appeared, so that tomorrow begins from an honest position rather than the comfortable fiction that nothing needs to change. Ulysses S. Grant was one of the most adaptive commanders of his entire era, not because his first approach was always correct, but because his process of examining what each day's decisions revealed was systematic enough that the same error rarely appeared twice. Tonight, before the day fully closes, 3 questions. Where did I react when I had already decided not to? Where did I hold the standard when the moment was actively pushing against it? What does the gap between those 2 answers tell me about what still needs to be built? Awareness is the only condition under which a pattern can actually change. If this is speaking to something you've been carrying, share this with someone still being controlled by what they feel. And drop "I reflect, I rebuild" in the comments. Because the ones who examine their days are the ones who actually evolve. Now, the final habit. Habit number 10, return to the present moment. Your emotions do not live in reality. They live in 2 places. The past, where what already happened, is being replayed long past the point where the replay can change anything, and the future, where what hasn't happened, yet is being rehearsed in its most alarming possible version. In both places, you are completely absent from what is actually in front of you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, for words from inside the most complex present moment the ancient world had to offer." Governing an empire through plague, military campaigns, and political instability, he understood that the only place any of it could be genuinely addressed was now. Winston Churchill led through 5 consecutive years of conditions specifically designed to pull attention backward toward losses and forward toward threats. his documented quality, the specific characteristic his contemporaries identified as what made sustained leadership possible, was the capacity to remain focused on what needed to be done in this moment. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, now. When the emotion rises, when the mind begins its pull toward the past or the future, return not to a thought, not to an argument with where the mind went, but to the present, your breath, your surroundings, the specific thing directly in front of you that belongs only to now. The past cannot be changed by your continued presence inside it. The future cannot be improved by the anxiety you invest in it before it ever arrives. But now, this moment, exactly as it is the only place you can actually do anything that matters. 10 habits, one continuous practice of meeting what arrives from a position that was already decided before it got there. You question the first thought. You release what was never yours. You choose the story. You expect the difficulty. You decide what the voice says. You detach from the outcome. You train the discomfort. You stop personalizing. You reflect. You return to now. The people who led through chaos, through uncertainty, through the conditions that produce reactive, emotionally driven responses in everyone around them were not the ones without emotion. They were the ones who had built the specific, daily practice of meeting emotion without becoming it. That practice is now yours. If this names something you have been carrying without addressing, make sure to like, subscribe, and send it to someone still being controlled by what they feel. And leave "I am in control, not controlled" in the comments as an aspiration, as the declaration of someone whose emotional state is no longer being determined by what arrived today.